Hey guys, what's going on? I'm back with another album review, a surprise album review for a Hayley Williams album, and it's not even really a review. It's more so just my initial thoughts, and if I get out any words of substance out of it, then that's pretty cool. But I wouldn't call it a full-fledged review. Yes, she dropped a surprise album. The album's called FOR VASES, descansos, I believe that's how you say it. But yeah, FOR VASES / descansos. And surprise album definitely, because he just released an album last year, which is Petals for Armor, which was one of my favorite albums of 2020, which in itself was kind of surprising, because I've never really been a big Hayley Williams fan. I don't really care for Paramore. I think their later stuff I liked a lot more, but that specific brand of pop punk they did in the 2000s, even as a teenager, didn't really care for it. But something about that album, Petals for Armor, I loved. Like in ways, it reminded me a lot of Radiohead, like In Rainbows era Radiohead, and she didn't screw that up. You know, she did a really good job of taking sort of that style and making it her own. And obviously, she's an amazing vocalist. And the album was really kind of just a piece of art, art pop, art rock, some electronica in there. This new album, Flowers for Faces, is more rooted in melancholy, folkiness, acoustic, a lot of acoustic. So in that sense, it definitely feels like a weird comparison to her last album, which is explosive with so many different dynamics of instrumentation, where this one's more down to the basics of just her and acoustic guitar and layers of vocals and maybe some keyboards and synth mixed in there. And yeah, on first listen, I can tell you that this is a pretty remarkable album. I can't immediately tell you if it's as good as Petals for Armor, but I think the masses will probably enjoy this one a little bit more. I just think the overall vibe and tone of the album is probably just more accessible to audiences, especially after a year where Taylor Swift released two pretty folk and two pretty sad albums, and with an artist like Phoebe Bridgers like exploding in front of us, getting nominated for Grammys and performing at Saturday Night Live this weekend. This is an album that comes at the right time. Either, I don't know if that's by mistake or on purpose, but I think that she proves that with her artistic capabilities, which is kind of through the roof after listening to this album, that she can do it just as good as anybody. I think that this album is... I may be just speaking too soon, because I just listened to the album and I plan on listening to it a lot more. But to me, this is almost just as good as a Phoebe Bridgers album, or definitely better than the last two Taylor Swift albums for me. When it comes to Taylor Swift, those albums I appreciated a lot. I thought that it was a nice artistic change up for her. But song structure wise, there's a lot of generic song structures on that album. And even on this album, where songs may seem like they're going to go a certain way, she pivots and sort of like goes the other way. And I'm not saying that the album is like a complete like piece of art and stuff that we've never heard before. It definitely sounds like a folk album, but one that's done extremely well. And honestly, the album just kind of comes right out of the gate with the opening track, First Thing to Go. It's mostly acoustic and vocal, with like I said, some vocal layers in there with some keyboard added in at the end. But it's not till the second song, My Limb, where we start to pick up more of the instrumentation, maybe some light drums, way more vocal layers. And these songs aren't happy songs. They're just not. So don't go into this album expecting a happy album. This is largely a pretty sad album. With a song like Inordinary coming in around the middle of the album, this song dives into her childhood and maybe some not so pleasant moments in her childhood dealing with her family. And I just find it to be pretty sad, but I think that this album feels like a coping mechanism. There's a lot of bad things going on in the world, and this is an album that she clearly has probably written within the past year or so. I'd say largely during the pandemic. I believe that she recorded the whole album at her Nashville home, and it was produced by somebody else. But yeah, this has the pandemic feel of the anxiety and frustrations that we all go through, and her diving into stuff in her past life and the trauma of things that happened at an earlier age. I'd say maybe the poppiest song on the album, which is still a pretty extraordinary song, is a song called Over Those Hills, where it's one of the only songs that features like predominant drums and bass that really just grooves. It's a really groovy song, but still doesn't lack any artistic integrity to it. It still feels fresh, and it has a really, really good hook and some really good guitar lines that really align well with the bass. In a song like Good Grief, you really see that sense of despair where she says, there's no such thing as good grief, which can be somewhat comedic when you think about the Charlie Brown character from the Peanuts. But yeah, is there really such thing as good grief? And the song really covers that relatively well while having an overall very emotional impact. And I like that the album can feel mostly quiet through the majority of it, but can have moments of explosiveness that really sort of just come out of nowhere, like in a song like HYD, where the middle section of it just feels so grand and big, and in the closing track, Just the Lover, which is maybe the best song on the album, and also could be argued as maybe the only rock song on the album. It starts soft enough, but then it sort of delves into some electric guitars and some really moody atmospheric pieces there in the second half. I just think it's a really good way to end a really good album. And through first listen, I couldn't notice any weak songs. I'm sure there's songs I like more than other songs, but while listening through it, and the album is 14 songs long, and it's roughly a little bit over 40 minutes long, I essentially had no problem getting through the album. There was no songs that felt like they dragged on. None of the songs are too long, especially those last 4 songs are pretty short, either ranging from 3 minutes or under 3 minutes. So yeah, the album doesn't drag. The album is not a drag, considering that it's a pretty sad album. And I'm not a big music critic reviewer guy on YouTube. I've only listened to 2 albums this year, I think, and that was Weezer's album that came out last week, and this new album by Hayley Williams. But 2021 is shaping up to be a pretty good year for music, for just moderate music listeners. I don't try to listen to everything, but I really liked her last album, and I saw that this came out, and I was like, well, I gotta put on the headphones and listen to this. And probably not even 3 songs in, I was messaging people, be like, hey, like, you gotta check this album out. If you didn't like her last album, you should probably give this one a listen, because it's different than that. So that's what I would tell you. If you didn't like Pedals for Armor, which I did, I thought it was really, really good, I think you should give this one a listen, especially in the age where these past 2 Taylor Swift albums have blown up so big, and they essentially came out of nowhere. I'd like to see some pretty good success for this, and hopefully the Grammys don't overlook this come nomination time at the end of the year, because they totally overlooked her last album, which is super unfortunate. But yeah, I really like this album. It's a nice surprise. What can I say? A very nice surprise. Flowers for Vases, check it out. If I had to give it a score, I'd give it an 8.3 out of 10, I think. 8.3 out of 10 is what I'm sticking with now. Yeah. Best album I've heard this year out of the 2 albums that I've listened to. Good year for music. So yeah, what did you think of this new Hayley Williams surprise album? I know that I thought it was really good, and I'm reading some other people's comments, and they think it's pretty good too. Leave your comment in the comment section, hit that subscribe button, and thank you for watching.